Brene Brown's research, lead researcher and writer on shame, says that when you're relating to a person, there's only two places you can come from. In all her research, you're either in empathy, that means, Ken, I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from. Doesn't mean I know exactly where you're coming from. You're either in empathy or you're in judgment, backing away, judging. It's just Matthew 7. You know, you've got a log in your eye and you're going around judging people, and then you don't like to be judged. So empathy or judgment are two key points of all relationships.
You know, I wonder if I've often said busyness is really robbing away from intimacy and relationship. But I wonder if intimacy, I've never thought of it like the whole snorkeling versus scuba diving.
Yeah.
I wonder if busyness is almost a way to mask our reluctance to stop, to get honest enough, to go deep, to maybe face some things in ourselves or the people around us that would have to be dealt with. It's easier just to like keep busy rather than to pause and really do that work.
Yeah, it's interesting you use that analogy because I don't think you and I have ever talked about it. I use the analogy back to Proverbs 20, verse 5. So they're the deep waters of our lives. What's down there? Let's explore that. And what a person will do often with oneself or in a relationship is water ski or hydroplane on top of the deep waters. And that's really more intensity, not intimacy. That's why a lot of couples or people in relationships, they fight or gossip, is they're more drawn to, and it's quite stimulating to the brain and the body to have this intensity, but they don't know intimacy as in intimacy, connection, or Jesus' high priestly prayer in John 17, that you two may be one.
Yeah.
So we would be in one accord. So often a person will hydroplane on top of it, staying busy. And that's where Brene Brown says, which I've shared with you before, is you either walk inside your story, my story, and own all of it. When we tend to orphan off parts of our story, like, I'm going to tell you everything, I'm not going to tell you that. It's where counseling can be redemptive, including pastoral counseling. Someone comes in and says, I'm not going to hide any part of me. I'm going to tell, we're just reversing Genesis 3, right? We all fig-leafed up. We've been hiding from ourselves, from somebody else, and from God, like that's going to work. So the idea is, the busyness will keep me all fig-leafed up. No one can get to know me until something happens, a global pandemic, a death, an illness, something tragic, and suddenly I can feel so isolated and disconnected, I'm not known. Busyness also, what it does again neurochemically, is it will feel like it will help you numb out. You either walk inside your story, all of it, or you'll stay busy and do what? Hustle for your worthiness. That's from Brene Brown. Spending your life just hustling for your worthiness. Most busy people somewhere between 0 and 70 are going to hit a wall. And at that moment, that's why suicidal rates, including among pastors, as you well know, people say it all comes, it's like suddenly they're emerged like deeply or submerged deeply into their stuff. And I say, in your life, what gets submerged, what you put down there, will later be emerged. What gets suppressed will later be expressed, and often in the context of a relationship.
Round the corner with me then.
Yeah.
Owning your story, I mean, working through it. You did a teaching for us and our entire staff about a year ago. I believe you call it the victim triangle.
Yeah.
And it's all about establishing healthy boundaries.
Right.
Because there's also this lie, I believe at least, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's this perception in culture and society, if you don't fully embrace me and everything that I think and everything I want to do, then you don't actually love me.
Right.
And you've taught that no, love still has boundaries and relationally. And I think of, you know, like friendships, relationships, employer-employee relationships. When a son or a daughter leaves their family to go get married, you know, or to be with their significant other, I mean, it's always, I've heard you say, it's redefining the contract.
Totally, yeah.
Teach us, let's have a conversation about how do you establish, what role do boundaries play, and how does it actually play out in real life?
Well, all relationships, as we've said, have a contract. I've challenged people, find me a relationship that doesn't have a contract, including with a pet. I mean, the contract is basically, I do a little hamburger, right? This is okay with me, like the top bun. This is okay with me. I'm all right with this. The bottom bun would be, and this is not okay with me. Implied in that is, and if you do that, here's the consequence. This is okay with me. This is not okay with me. This is like a deal breaker, and this little middle piece of meat can be what I'm willing to negotiate. I say, well, not my favorite, but we can negotiate that. So there's not a relationship that I can find that doesn't have a contract. Problem is so many of them, if not indeed most, are not expressed or not written down. I have my Healthy Conversations contract that I use with couples, and they literally, in the workshops I do, write down the contract where this is okay, this is not okay, what to do. And boundaries are to keep me safe. I lock my doors in my home in North Carolina to keep me and my family safe, not to peek out the window or the peephole to see if somebody's coming. I'm not trying, people will say, well, I boundaried Ken. No, you don't boundary another person. You boundary yourself and to keep yourself safe. And you get to discern, this is okay with me, this is not okay with me. What are the boundaries I need? You never, as you write your own contract, you never pick up a pen, hand it to the other person and say, co-sign my contract. Boundaries are unilateral. They're not bilateral. It doesn't mean you're grandstanding. I tell people my 3 G's in a relationship: don't grandstand, which is I'll do whatever I want. Don't grovel, please. I'll do anything to please you, but be grounded. Don't grandstand. Don't grovel, but be grounded.
So that would even be true in marriage.
Very true in marriage. Yeah.
Not to co-sign, but for they themselves, this is my boundary.
Right, and people will say, I could spend all day and bore you with things I've heard. Like, my boundary is you will give me more sex in marriage. No, that's not a boundary. So people will try to do a boundary to get you to do something. Now, a boundary can be like, let's pick alcohol for one, not picking on it, but someone could say, my boundary is you will not drink. Well, no, stay in I do 3 hula hoops, right? This is my hula hoop. That's your hula hoop. The relationship's a 3rd hula hoop. And say, my boundary is I will not be in a relationship with someone who gets drunk. You say, what does that mean in divorce? And I'm not going there. I'm just saying I won't be in a relationship with someone who gets drunk or abuses alcohol, or someone who uses abusive language, or someone, we would call that verbal and emotional abuse. Now, you can't do that. That's game on for some people. I won't be in a relationship. And then, I don't know, everybody's going to freak out and run. Jim Cress just said to tell people to go divorce. I did not say that. But I am saying to keep you safe. When you look at, as you've alluded to, agape love, agapao, is to say, I want to seek the other person's highest good. So if you're treating me in an unhealthy way, and I allow that because what I tolerate will persist, right? Then I'm literally giving you the pen and say, you sign and I'll sign without signing, that you get to treat me that way. It's my job. Self-care is my responsibility. You used the 2 classic commands Christ gave. If I'm to love my neighbor as I love myself, then I better reverse that, and truly agape myself and love myself well. Not narcissistic worship of myself, but to love myself well, going vertical with God. Is this okay with me? Anything's not a faith is sin. Like, now I know this is unhealthy and I keep tolerating that. I'm actually sinning against you by allowing you to treat me that way. I'm an accomplice to your crime. Don't want to do that.
And I think that's where it gets twisted is maybe not the right word, but the perception, it would be unloving for you to put anything in place that would restrict, whether it's a boss, a spouse, a best friend, a child to a parent. I mean, again, that's loving discipline. When a parent disciplines their child, I mean, Scripture, if you love your children, you will discipline them. That's boundaries and consequences.
That's right, yeah.
Show me what it looks like, the victim triangle then, of how that plays out in real life. Can you draw that out for us?
Yes, as long as you tolerate my artistic ability. By the way, I think I said this, but if not, a boundary, this is a game-changing statement. A boundary without a consequence is a mere suggestion. The consequence is not punishment. We're a nation of laws. Most people, if they're out here on I-70, if they were a little over the speed limit and there is someone who was with law enforcement sitting there, obviously the average person does not hit the gas. By the way, they're not even thinking about it. It's so autonomic, they let off the gas or hit brakes.
Isn't that true?
It was just trained. So what we're doing in life is we're wired for laws, right? Like the old line that someone said, the 10 Commandments weren't the 10 suggestions. So for me in my own life to be able to say, this is not good with me, it is not healthy for me for you to treat me that way. A boundary without a consequence is a mere suggestion. So we do it with parenting. The consequence is, if you do this, then here's what will happen. And the number one way, in boundaries work, we say, the number one way you reinforce, not cause, but the number one way you reinforce somebody else's unhealthy treatment of you is to have intermittent boundaries. No, no, no. All right, this time I let you do it. They know. Remember, you old enough or young enough to remember the owl and the Tootsie Pop? How many licks to the center of the Tootsie Pop? You know, the kid would try to lick, and the owl took it and said 1, 2, 3, crunch, and bit into it. 3 licks, crunch, and he's in the middle of the Tootsie Pop. And that's what people do. They say, this person will have a boundary about 6 times. The 7th time they go, okay, I'll let you do it. So you've just trained them. Blah, 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 6 times. 7th time, they'll leave the door open and let you come in. Let's go and look at this has been called in 1968, for those trivia people out there, Dr. Stephen Karpman, Karpman, came up with this triangle. He just looked at relationships. When you see this, if you see this, you'll see it everywhere you go now. It is so simple. Someone else has dubbed it, which I use the language, the victim triangle. We have a lot of that going on in our culture right now. And I'm not saying more commentary about that, but it's not new. Victimization's all through the Bible. Hosea, it's funny, God says people cry, and he says they wail upon their bed instead of crying from their hearts. Both are crying. One is just wailing, like throwing a tantrum, right out of God's word. They wail upon their beds instead of crying from their hearts. So there's a lot of people out there struggling with a victim mentality.
Yep.
And again, as I've said, what you don't work out, you'll act out. There's stuff where they were victimized. They were oppressed. They were hurt. And if they don't work through that, then every victim you'll see here will look for a perpetrator. We'll show you
Someone
that.
to blame.
Someone to blame. So let me draw the red one first. This will end up looking a little bit like the Star of David. It's not. It's just how it goes. So in the triangle, we'll draw this best we can. And I like it when it's a little messy, you know?
Yep.
Meaning it's not symmetrical lines. Here at the top of it, you will have someone that we simply call the victim. This is living with a victim mentality. We all were Jim Cress is a victim of childhood sexual abuse. That's true. So, and physical abuse. So with that is, this person doesn't deal with their victimization, so they perpetually live with a victim mentality. If they are there for a while, they would like to have a rescuer. This is Superman. This is somebody who comes in. This is the people pleaser, various Enneagram numbers, if you're into that. So they would like to have someone who will try to rescue them from being a victim. 2 problems. There's probably several. One, until they're ready, they don't want to come out of being a victim.
Isn't that true?
They don't want to. So if you rescue them, you've got a problem. That's why people who've been lifeguards know you don't try to come up and rescue someone from the front, they'll drown you. The victim will drown you. So here, as a person will try to go up and rescue them, they don't want to be that. The victim will tolerate them because they like it for a while. But eventually, every rescuer hits a spot where they say, oh, I can't do that this time, or this doesn't work for me. That's what I call just a no.
I've ran into people that it appears even when everything's fine,
Yeah.
if there's not a crisis, it's almost like they create a crisis so they can step in and be the one who saved the day. Would that be the rescuer mentality?
Very much. And see, what a lot of people will do in this triangle, or people say, I'm a people pleaser. Well, the people pleaser is very controlling, very powerful, because it's like with a people pleaser in what we often call codependency. I'm okay if you're okay, then I can be okay. Are you okay? So 2 things. One, I've got this like external locus of control as a rescuer, that the number one person you're trying to please when you're a people pleaser is yourself. It's not passive, it's very powerful. I can feel okay in all my relational anxiety. If you're okay, you're not going to please a victim. You will a little bit here, but ultimately they're going to turn on you because the victim doesn't want this. The victim demands a perpetrator or persecutor. So the rescuer, very, very powerful. If you want to get really theological and psychological, they never look at themselves. They're always saying, I know what's best for Ken. I know what's best for Jim. I know what they need. People will do that in relationships. You know, we're not wired for unsolicited advice. Parents will do it when the kids get older. Let me tell you, no, son or daughter, there's something I see. You open to a thought is language I use. So the rescue is very powerful. They ultimately hit a no and say, Oh, I can't do that this time. Immediately, the victim will bounce you over here to what Cartman called persecutor. I'm going to use a different term. Perpetrator. Now, spelled differently, right? But notice it has the word traitor in it. So this collapses really. The victim stays victim ultimately by having a perpetrator. And what they do, by the way, when the rescuer finally says no, often with a boundary maybe, they'll bounce this rescuer over here. You're my perpetrator. I use a stronger word than persecutor because it'll feel like you've harmed me. This is wrong. And if it's hysterical, it's historical. Where are they back in their life story? And they will project dad's face, mom's face, someone who really did perpetrate. This is a lot of energy here. The rescuer is never going to look at him or herself. They're always looking here to save. The victim never wants to look. It's Matthew 7. Everybody else has got this big log in their eye. They will always look at the magnifying glass, never in the mirror, which I'm going to show you in a moment is how you get out if you want to get out of being a victim. But here, they will project. So people are pressing buttons in you. Like if you look at this language, remember our words frame our reality. You made me angry. That's always victim language.
Well,
you don't have power to do that. Eleanor Roosevelt, FDR's wife, said that you can't make me feel anything unless I first give you the permission to do it. You'll hear the language here. You made me do this, or it's your fault. They blame, and a blame is always an attempt to discharge pain when someone's blaming like that. So they need a perpetrator for them to stay vested here. So let's look at for a moment a green triangle here. Red means stop, get out, and then green is how do you get out of this mess if you want to. So I'm going to draw the triangle upside down. That's where it can begin to kind of look like the Star of David. It's actually not. Good. The victim, and for me always, everything points here. This is going to be the hardest place to get out of. It's biblical. It is Psalm 51. Have mercy on me, O God, after his sin, where David victimized others. A broken and contrite heart, God will not despise. A victim, if they stay victim, will never take ownership. Or worse, they'll use the word B-U-T. Yeah, I did this, and people will do it. Most of us have done this somewhere, if not all of us, even in a marriage. Okay, you did this. I did this, and I'll take ownership, but you provoked me. Take the but out of the ownership. Is just stop and say, this is what I did. Romans implies in scriptures that our sin, my sin, should shut my mouth. Stop and say, this is what I did. The victim, how do they get out? They have to hear, that's an A there, trust me. Take, and I'm going to use the word ownership. If you will, take responsibility. Hey, this is on me. Classically, the words we use here are victim and agent or agency. I was harmed. People in our culture today, they were harmed. I was harmed, and not but, and I need to take ownership and say, what do I need to do to work this out? To go to therapy. Therapy is not the only show in town. To go to a pastor, someone else, Titus 2, an older woman, an older man, and say, I need to work through this. Journal, write, read books, go to a workshop, something that I need to take ownership and say, yes, I was harmed. And I now need to watch love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, victim. When I was a child, I thought, reasoned, I acted like a child. Watch ownership. When I became an adult, I, not you, not some therapist, I put away childish things.
Is that where your fit mentality would come in?
It would be, and this is where if you go here, the idea of taking ownership, as we have talked, me and you and Serena have talked much about walking in your story and owning it, is here the fit principle is F, facts, this happened to me. And tell the story.
Or I did it.
Or you can say, I did it, both. Because part of it is, if you don't work out your story, it's going to be, I'm telling you, it'll be really hard to go here.
Yeah.
You're trying to pole vault over your victimization versus go through it. I did it to you, that's also true, and this was what was done to me. I is impact. The impact is, this is what all this stuff did to me. No wonder I stay here, because this feels very powerful, when in my abuse or my neglect or abandonment, I feel quite impotent, not powerful. Other side of the I is, impact is, How say to another person, Ken, I want to take ownership here, not be a victim. This is what I did to you. You know, I took a shot at you. I did some, that was rude what I said. How'd you feel? I don't even use the word, how did it make you feel? How did it make you? How'd you feel when I treated you that way? Most people in the culture will never do that. They'll do fact, then T is track. They'll jump from, I did it, we forgive me. Well, aphiemi is that Greek word in the Bible that means to cancel the debt. So walk through the debt and say, hey, would you tell me, how did it make you feel? Or how did you feel when that happened?
That's good.
And you say, it really hurt, whatever else. Then T, track, is I take responsibility. That's on me. It's nothing about you. Well, you kind of ticked me off too. It's not about that. I take responsibility. And I would say how I use it is, in time, I'm asking that you would forgive me. Because I don't expect a person to forgive on a dime. They might, but they take ownership. But they take full ownership with no buts. Now, if somebody has you in the rescuer mode, sometimes you say, what do you mean they have you in it? Because often they will. They want you to be in the rescuing mode, or you're just a good volunteer. You sign up because you like being the rescuer. Sometimes, you remember, you're always changing the contract here. The rescuer, how do they get out? They go over here, and it's a simple word, which is the theme of today, is they have boundaries. So again, a boundary without a consequence is a mere suggestion. If you talk to me that way, I'm going to hang up the phone. If you use this language or treat me this way, I will get my car keys and leave. That's not stonewalling, which we'll get to later, but it's just to say, if you do this, I will not stay engaged with you. Boundaries are unilateral. You don't put the word okay question mark at the end of a boundary. Okay, are you all right? It's like, this is not okay with me. I have a stop sign in my floor in my office. It's just a big stop sign. And I point to it and say, you need to have a stop sign saying, it's my job to teach you how to treat me. Sometimes I get in therapy or counseling or discipleship and realize, now I know I've been allowing you to, now it's a new rule. That's not okay for me, for you to treat me that way. Boundaries.
Where's the part, though, about, and I'm thinking of, and I've heard you share in a story from your own example, because some people, when they establish a boundary, it's self-care. It's what I need for me, knowing it's probably going to be perceived by others for whatever reason, maybe as selfish or, hey, I want to go to lunch with you, or hey, I want to get together with you.
Right.
And sometimes we lie to ourselves and we lie to others by saying stuff we really don't mean.
That's right.
But to establish a boundary, I mean, I guess you just have to get to the point where, and again, I'm best friend relationships, parent, child, spouse, significant other, boss, coworker. You just say, you just have to establish, this is what I need. And then you just communicate that. Is that how it works? Or?
Well, the scripture helps us, doesn't it? Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Little children explain, and often the voice will tighten up. And here's why I'm doing that. Adults inform. Children explain, adults inform. And you get to say, thank you, Ken. Ken says, hey, let's go out and grab a burger. I can look at my schedule, or maybe I'm involved in other relationships, whatever. He can't know all behind the scenes for me. And I say, he asked me to go out to lunch, and I can say, thank you, Ken, and that doesn't work for me. Now just pause. Why do we need to add more? Well, that's often this piece coming out, whoa, what will people think? And all that. If you want to say, you know, my schedule's really full. I was talking with Jackson, your son, about this last night, really with all of us. And I said, you know, someone has well said that if we're in our culture today and someone says, dude, let's do lunch, then phones ought to come out immediately and schedule it. Or we're lying.
Yeah.
And that's just the new, let's do lunch. Yeah, man. And nobody's intended to do lunch. So the idea is someone says, or would you go do this with me? Or sometimes it's even parents. Hey, sometimes the kid says, hey, we have in-laws and we're going to do something unique this Christmas. We're not we can't, won't come home. That's the can't, won't principle. We can't come home for Christmas. Sometimes people say we've moved away or whatever and say, or we're going to go on a cruise this Christmas just by ourselves. We won't be there for the family thing. Well, parents can be disappointed with that. That's fine. And the kid can say, and here's why, versus, thank you, Mom and Dad. You know, we love being home at Christmas, or we don't. And but we're going to go do this Christmas. And parents go, well, why? Can you just say, and if they start doing this, well, isn't there more? They actually go down here to perpetrator role. Well, couldn't you just do it after Christmas or all like that? Versus accepting on this side, okay, I've got my grief. That's the biggest secret of counseling I learned, is unprocessed grief. You say, what do you do in there? People haven't grieved. They haven't grieved through their life story. They haven't grieved through relationships.
where does that part fit into this when I've heard you describe the me, but it's not we?
Yeah.
Is that in the boundaries section, or is that something different?
This is all right here. So you, me, and we.
Yes.
And Lisa Turkhurst and I, we've talked about that, a workshop with her and a couple of my other friends that we do this workshop together. It's called You, Me, and We. So it's like in here, this person, the rescuer, is always a we person. They're always enmeshed here trying to because that's why to get out of being the rescuer, they have to go have boundaries. But they'll feel like they're losing their identity. So I use 3 hula hoops in my office, which is, this is your stuff, this is my stuff. The third hula hoop out here is the relationship. That's the we. It's why when I perform as an ordained pastor wedding ceremonies, I ask the couples, please don't go back and snuff out the unity candles, because 2 whole lives, systems, generations are back here.
Yeah.
So my idea, people will use the word we. We're not having this conversation, or we're not going to talk about it. Well, to a manipulator or to a victim, that's game on. I'm not having this conversation, or my words I use with my wife, children, friends, I'm kind of known for that, is thank you, and I don't have that to give. Or I'll say, Ken, I'd like to do this with you. Do you have it to give? I'm honoring your I-ness, your me-ness, and I'm over here. You'll hear it with a lot of the we language. That's when it comes in.
That's good.
So let's look at perpetrator, and we can come back if you have more questions. How do you get out of being a perpetrator? And the way we describe that is a very simple word, explore. And I'll let you know what this means. Explore options. Sometimes a victim, I've done this sadly too many times, where a victim is saying, you're the perpetrator, and lo and behold, you are. If you're going to be a victim down there, I'll put my boot on you. Or if you're going to do that, I'll treat you like one. So the person literally becomes a perpetrator. But sometimes that's not true. And so the perpetrator, someone says, wow, Shakespeare said, methinks thou dost protest too much. I feel like I'm having a healthy boundary here, and you've got me as the perpetrator. See, people will bounce all over this triangle. So to explore options, you go, the triangle's designed this. Watch, victim, how do you get out? In our couples workshops, we tape off the floor. Yeah, I see that in a room full of couples and have one couple at a time. Pick a topic to talk about, and they walk around it, and everybody sees it. It's living color. The victim says the way out of being the victim to get on the green triangle. Green means go, red means stop. Take ownership. Someone, if you're in a rescuing role, have boundaries. If someone has you in the perpetrator role, come up here. Explore options. An option would be Matthew 18. It's still in the Bible. Let's bring a couple witnesses. If not, more. If not, take it to the church. Someone says, hey, we're not able to work through this. You don't even have to go to counseling for it. Get some other people to say, would you help us explore options? Could we get a third party, someone maybe we both trust, to talk about, because we're stuck here in this dance. Victim, perpetrator, victim, perpetrator. Get someone else. God's already addressed that in His Word. In the multitude of counselors, there's wisdom and safety. It can be here and say, I'm willing, because sometimes this happens in a marriage. Babe, let's get a counselor, and because we are loggerheads here. We're stuck. And let's go through, remember, if it's hysterical, it's historical, it may be here, because the number one thing couples fight over is nothing at all. It's not about this other stuff. And you explore the option. One option could be, let's get a third party. Let's get counseling. Watch this option. Is, you know what, I want to really look at that because I took a shot at you. For every rip in a relationship, there needs to be a repair. And sometimes I've done that a bunch and said, I did quid pro quo. Why'd you hit your brother? All parents know he hit me first. So a lot of kid stuff goes on in adult relationships. So I can say, I want to explore the option that I was mean. I kind of did perpetrate you there. You did something to me and I did it right back to hurt you. But that's what we mean by explore options. Is there anything to own here? And so our idea, again, the conclusion is get off red and get on to green. And I tell you, the more you do it, it's really not that hard to do. Who will run this whole show is the victim. The victim will say, because if the victim doesn't ever take ownership, you say, well, what do? We do this with couples in our workshops. Still yourself, your you-ness, you get on green. If you get on green and say, I'll explore options, they don't let you. I have boundaries. They don't honor your boundaries. They never take ownership and say, you do. Still stay on green. If you take this out, often if this person doesn't come out of a victim mentality, or they say, I'll take ownership, but it's going to mean probably the termination of a relationship. I don't know what that means. Everybody's got to decide what that means.
The other thing, just talk briefly about boundaries and how they not necessarily change, but maybe they're redefined in different seasons or different stages of growth and development. I mean, when you're kids, I mean, the boundary for a 4-year-old, 14-year-old, or 34-year-old, I'm assuming that relationship looks different. How have you found it works best in communicating? I mean, do you just sit down and say, hey, I want to have a conversation about some stuff?
I like that. 2 things that'll kill a relationship: unfulfilled expectations. I need this to happen, and it's not, and I need that not to happen. 2 sides of one coin. 2 things that'll kill any relationship: unfulfilled expectations. Second, undelivered communications. Because see, I'm up here, I have drafted emails and text in my mind of, this ain't cool. I don't like this. I read a book. I heard Pastor Ken teach and went, yeah, right out of the Word of God. I mean, this book is loaded with boundaries and thoughts, and this is not good. And people picked up stones to stone Jesus, and he pieced out of the crowd and just said, my time is not yet come. Jesus was the most boundaried person ever. So that piece is, I'd say, when you know better, you do better. That changes through life. And to say, I used to be okay with this, I just didn't know better. Maybe that's how I saw my parents do, and now I know better. In the Christian publishing and really the secular publishing field, it's done all the time. People have the light come on and go, now I see I shouldn't allow this to happen. And I want a person to come and communicate the text. They'll think, well, this has changed for me. This is no longer okay. Yeah, I want you to come. You don't have to have a come to Jesus meeting, but get your spouse or someone you're in a relationship with and say, hey, are you open to something I can share with you? Yeah. I really realized in my life that this is kind of on me. Notice, take responsibility and ownership. It's on me that I've been okay with this, and maybe I really wasn't okay with this in our relationship, but now I know better for sure, and I'm no longer okay with it. And by the way, this is about me, not about you over there. People read a book, sit there and think it, and they don't let the person know. Now, you can also come in with a hammer, which puts you here. I've read this book, and the author says this, and I'm going to let you have it. I'm going to let you know, here's my boundary. That's not a boundary. That's a wall. We don't want to do walls.
You talked about stonewalling versus boundary. Is that it right there?
Yeah, and we'll talk about that, I think, later. In the stonewalling is one of the 4 horsemen of the relational apocalypse. And so it is where I am intentionally going to shut you out. I'm going to make you pay. I'm going to give you the silent treatment. In modern parlance now, we talk about ghosting. It says, see, you read my text. If you have that on your phone, or I know you read that text, and not a peep. I reach out to you and say, could we talk? And someone says, it's solitary confinement. I won't even honor you with a response. Stonewalling it implies time. Stonewalling is not, I need 20 minutes for my limbic brain, if you study that, to calm down, or I need an hour, but deliver the message. Hey, if you and Serena were talking, I know this would never happen, but if you all ever had a struggle and say, I need a half hour to just calm down, I'm going to drink some water, which lowers anxiety, I'm going to go take a walk, but I promise to circle back in 29.55 minutes to come back and say, let's see if we can talk about this. So that stonewalling is mute, do not disturb, peace out, I'm going to shut you out and isolate you over there. That hits often core abandonment stuff for all of us as kids too.
And I think that's one of the, the work that Serena and I did with you, and not just it's working through the story, but then it was the tools to interact together, to be on the same team. And again, it could be marriage, it could be neighbors, best friends, work relationships, to do the work. And I just, again, thank you so much for giving us biblical and practical teaching on how to navigate relationships when there's so much miscommunication out there about what does it mean to help people get out of the victim mentality, take ownership, establish boundaries, communicate them well, and to really walk in that best plan God has for us one day, one step at a time.
And one way to look at a conclusion, little child in all of us, back to 1 Corinthians 13. When I was a child, I did all this like a child, but I need to become an adult. Little child on the red, the healthy adults on the green. And a lot of us, we just need to learn how to adult better.
Thank you.